Space, the final magical frontier. These are the voyages of two mega nerds who like to talk about Savage Worlds. Carl, engage!
Savage Worlds, one of the best games today.
Welcome back, Savages. This is Tabletop Tango. I'm your host, Eric. Please like, subscribe, cast space magic at those buttons. We really appreciate it. So today I'm going to deep dive into the Arcane Backgrounds found in the new science fiction companion, or relatively new companion. This is going to be a part one. I didn't want to do all of them at once, just for both view time and my own sanity and voice. So yeah, this is going to be part one. Now, I've done a couple of these before, but just to reiterate, when we're going through this, this is just my opinions. It's also going to be mechanically, like how I see how they're balanced. And when we say that, that's kind of based, I use the ancestral creation rules found in core Savage Worlds and Fantasy Guide, all that stuff as kind of the benchmark. And the super, like there's while balance in Savage Worlds is more of an art than a science, there is some science there. So yeah, so that's just for your information. I also want to see a lot of times if the flavor that they're trying to do kind of matches the mechanics and vice versa. So yeah, I say we just get right into it. OBS magic, here we go. Whoa, okay. We're starting out with the Chaplain. Now, the Chaplain is kind of a priest of some sort that kind of is in the front line with their militia or armies. Now, all of these Arcane Backgrounds, or like a lot of them, I think they're drawing from, specifically a lot of science fiction media out there to get their inspiration for them. This one is, you can kind of see they have a little Warhammer quote right there. So yeah, that makes sense. Although it is starting out a faith-based arcane caster, I like that there is a psionic variant just right in the introduction. So you change, faith to psionics, you change the requirements to smarts, and you change anything else to smarts too that's found throughout it. And that would actually more gel with, I believe, I'm not a big Warhammer guy, but that would more gel with the Psychers of Warhammer. So anyways, yeah. They're basically space clerics, okay? So let's just get into it. Yeah, their starting powers, they get boost trait, so it's just boost trait only, which means that you get the limitations for that. So you get the aspect limitation. So it would cost one less power point. You get healing, and then one other power from the list with 10 power points. So this is just kind of the standard magical miracle, 3 powers to 10 power points, although 2 of them are set. Pretty good set. I mean, obviously healing, if you're doing a space cleric, is great. The boost trait, boost trait to me isn't always the most strongest, but its strength is in its versatility. Now, if you wanted to debuff with lower trait, you basically have to take the power again, and then you would just take lower trait, and then have the aspect limitation on that as well. Their power list, it's a pretty good list. There's lots of healing, utility, buff, debuff, and surprisingly, there's some control powers in here, like barrier, which I just don't know how you're just like believing so hard that you create a magical light barrier. I don't know. Usually, I think, especially in the science fiction thing, barrier wouldn't be there. So I'm a little surprised by some of the choices in here. But the glaring weakness here is there's no damage powers and there's no kind of mobility powers like teleport or wall walker, etc. Okay. Then you get Mercy right away, which as an action, you can spend 1 power point to basically within your spirit range, which is kind of unique. Often it'll just be always in smarts range. Here it kind of lines up with you being a spirit-based caster. Now, if you went the psionic variant, I assume that would change the smarts. I certainly, as a game master, I would allow that. But yeah, so within your spirit range, you can automatically get rid of distracted, vulnerable, or shaken. And for 2 points, you get rid of stun effects. So first of all, Mercy was first found in Savage Pathfinder, I believe, in Cleric. It's also in the fantasy book. I think it's just a separate edge. It's like Veteran. It's a seasoned edge in, or is it Novice? I think it's Novice in the Cleric. Yeah, Novice. Yeah, I mean, so here's the original version from Cleric, and you can see that it is a, oops, I'm messing with OBS. It is a Novice edge, and it does the same thing, except it does not have the stun effect that this version does, where you can't get rid of stun for 2 points. First of all, let's just talk a little bit about kind of how to utilize this the best. So distracted and vulnerable are, Is this worth it? It's absolutely a good thing to have here, right? It adds to your flexibility as kind of being this healer, and you're, it's within your smart experience range, so it's not a huge range. So, and you can increase this with mods, so you do kind of have to be more in the front-ish area line. And distracted or vulnerable can be actually absolutely brutal to players, but like I don't always see that happening really that much on other players. Maybe your game master is different, or you as a game master play it differently. Often, with distraction vulnerable, like it's really nice that it's here, because that is really important with initiative orders, whether you're being a tester or you're kind of a healer for those kind of conditions. If you have a party member is vulnerable and then there's a ton of enemies going, then this is absolutely worth it to spend PowerPoint and action. And the bigger drawback here is not actually the PowerPoint, it's the action. You're using your probably whole action, your whole turn on doing this. So it really has to be impactful. So I would recommend somebody thinking about playing this is just don't always use it, right? If it's maybe like one person going before your ally who's vulnerable and they're kind of far away from them, it's not going to be worth it, right? Same thing with distracted. It might not be even worth it to get rid of distracted. To give up your whole action, you probably have better things to do with your actions. So it's nice that it's here. It's worth the whole edge, and it's beefed up, as you can see. The shaken thing, again, that's another one that I would be kind of cautious about doing, just because player characters get, everybody gets to, but you get to just, shake it at the beginning of your turn for free, and they can always spend a penny. So that's another one that I would be very hesitant to do if it was like a frontline person who's surrounded by a bunch of people, and so they're going to get hit much easier because the shaken's happening. Then yes, it's worth it, right? So it's good that it's here. I just mean, just don't go like crazy with it, right? Be kind of cautious with spending your action over your PowerPoint. Now, stunned is an absolutely brutal effect where once it happens on you, it's kind of hard to get off, at least for the very first round, and you're vulnerable for the whole time. So, I just want to show that besides powers doing stunned, they're also, because we're doing sci-fi, I don't know, let me actually make this a little bit bigger. Hard to see here. Oh. Okay. Sorry. Here we go. Anyways, as you can see, there's like stun batons and stun pikes, and you can add stun onto melee weapons, and there's some other, range weapons that can do it. So, yeah, just showing here that like, because it's a science fiction game, there's a lot of more like mundane ways to get stunned. So, doing an action to get rid of stun is absolutely worth it. So that 2-point stun effect one can be very, very worth it, and that it just automatically happens makes it worth it. And yeah. Okay, and what else do we have here? So they're considered a miracle, so they get access to the Miracle's Edge, which is the Holy Unholy Warrior, which basically means they can spend a PowerPoint to kind of soak after their soak roll is made, which definitely kind of fits, and that's just the basic miracles of Suede anyways, but it just fits the frontline thing. And then they have Vow Major. Now Vow Major is, it's very flavorful. It's kind of a weak major hindrance when we're talking mechanically. It's either like the game master doesn't really do much with it at all. I find it way better both as a player and a game master when you kind of come up with a creative, couple different tenets basically that are in the vow, and then as a game master try to create the situations where they're going to be challenged. Like, if you you shouldn't desecrate a tomb or something, then, put like some juicy treasure in a tomb that would really, the party members would want to desecrate it, but you having this faith, can't or won't. So yeah, so definitely strong. It's pretty balanced, right? It's a major hindrance, balancing against a mercy, which is a full edge. I still think it's a little bit on the stronger side because mercy is buffed at here and vow is always kind of a weak hindrance. Cool. Let's talk about their edges now. Yeah. So we have Litany of Fury. Now, I'd say their edges are a little bit all over the place, but they're very interesting. But we have Litany of Fury, which basically is if you have command and they're within your command range, you add +2 to damage. This is a really good command edge. Now, command edges are leadership edges, I should say, are much better in modern and science fiction game because your command range is actually equal to like radio contact often. So especially in the science fiction game, like having a little earpiece and having, communication, maybe even audio with like, holographic projection or whatever is certainly possible. So your command range is much bigger than 10 inches, which is often the kind of failing of normal leadership builds. So yeah. +2 damage is super solid. That's a ton of damage, especially once you get the edge that applies all your leadership stuff to your allies. like your player character allies, your wildcard allies. So +2 damage is humongous, right? It's absolutely humongous to be putting on. This will add a ton of damage. But again, it's kind of weird because this is like you already have to have command and probably again, I forgot the name of the edge, but the one where you apply it to other wild cards and probably some other ones that are, I would take probably before this, like the one that gives you an extra initiative card to give to people, or the one that allows you to use battle to support. Also, battle is a smarts-based skill, so you're kind of a mix of smarts and spirit here, but that's fine. So it is kind of a weird edge to see in an arcane background, because it really has nothing to do with the power set itself. It has to do with a totally different type of gameplay, which is the whole leadership edge system. So just kind of weird, but I still like it, and I guess it kind of fits the theme. And they actually added in one other leadership edge in here too. So there's definitely trying to give some more support to leadership characters. And it is very powerful. I would say this is almost A or A plus as far as the leadership stuff goes, just because +2 damage is so much. Okay, Reproach. Now Reproach, it's funny that Litany of Fury doesn't need command, but I guess you have to have command for it to work. It's just funny that it's not in the requirements. But okay, Reproach needs Spirit of a D8. So I'm not sure if that switches to the Smarts D8 if you're the Psionic variant, but as you can see, you need Intimidation of a D8 anyways, so you probably have a Spirit of a D8 anyways. Basically you can spend 2 power points to grant any other character or group within 12 inches, which is a very big range. I mean, if you looked at that as like Spirit die or Smart die, that would be a D12, right? So you spend 2 power points to give any of them a reroll as if they'd spent a Benny. This takes place on the target's character or the group's turn, even if you've already acted this turn, and there's no restriction on like only once per round or something. So you can do this as many times you want. Now, when they're talking about group, that's not just like, your whole party is doing evasion rolls, right? So I just spent 2 power points to give them all a reroll. No, it's a group of extras. It's like one roll that's a group roll. So that's usually extras. So if you have a bunch of followers under you, especially if you are going to leadership, then yeah, that's kind of a group of extras. But this one is crazy, crazy good. Now, this is kind of reminiscent of the Bard Inspire Heroics edge, which allows you to spend a Benny at the beginning of combat, and then you get kind of like 5 tokens that you can use to give rerolls. This is included in anything. This is also kind of similar to Common Bond, where Common Bond allows you to, let me get it up here. Common Bond allows you to, you can freely give your own bennies to other people, and they can use it. Now, this is definitely much stronger than Common Bond, although Common Bond still has its place. Let's get into it, because this one requires a little bit more talking about. So yeah, as you can see right here, 2 power points, right, is an amazing value to do this. When we compare it to Common Bond, you give 1 Benny to somebody and say most of the time it's for a reroll, right? So 1 use of Common Bond equals 2 uses of Reproach, because we know that a Benny is worth 5 power points. So, it's kind of a 1 to 2, right? And this only gets better as you increase the amount of uses that you use it. So if you were to use Common Bond twice, right, that's the same as using Reproach 5 times. So the benefits increase kind of exponentially as you go up with the more uses, because 2 Bennies is worth 10 power points, right? And so that's 5 uses of Reproach. Yeah, and there's another little thing here that's really interesting, is that it's if they spent a Benny, which is different from the Inspire Heroics, which specifically stated that it wasn't like spending a Benny. So if somebody that you're spending Reproach on has Elan or has the edge that allows you to get +2 damage when they reroll damage, then they get those benefits too. So that's like an extra little bonus. So this is really, really strong and powerful. And I like the flavor here that you need an Intimidation of a D8. You don't have to use it. It's just that you're like being like, you failed, it's just a fun kind of flavor. Although the Intimidation of a D8 is a high bar, and it kind of sets a specific type of character to use it, which is kind of sad, but whatever. Maybe I would have liked to see an Intimidation of D6, right? But yeah, so really powerful. And now with Common Bond, you still has a place in that Common Bond can be used to give somebody a Benny for spending arcane points, to get a new initiative order, right? To those kind of things. So to soak. So Common Bond still has its place, but this is just way better. So all in all, I think Chaplain is a very, core, you're getting the Space Cleric that you want pretty much, along with Mercy. You're getting enough to just kind of run with that. The Chaplain edges are kind of almost more specific to other play styles. Again, they don't really play into the arcane background at all, but they're kind of interesting there. So overall, I definitely give Chaplain an A. I mean, it's strong on flavor, but mechanically, maybe it doesn't quite mesh all together that well, like I said, but it has really interesting options. Okay. Let's move on to Chronomancer, Time Lord. I don't know why I'm saying it like that. Now, this one I have a very big love and hate relationship with. This one I would say is I have to shout out to the game masters and to players. You know, either if you're a player before using this, check with your game master first. If you're a game master, I want you to think long and hard before you just allow this as is, but let's get into it. So this person has control over time to a certain amount of extent. They are a focus gifted arcane background, which actually a lot of these are in the science fiction book. So they have a spirit of a d6. Focus is their arcane skill. Now they start with 2 available powers from the list below and 15 power points. So already they're at like a 1 point advantage. Like again, 1 point like as like half an edge, because the normal kind of archetype for arcane backgrounds is either 3 powers, 3 powers that you can choose from and 10 power points, or 1 power to choose and 15 power points. So this one, you're getting an extra power, which is equal to half an edge. Now the available power list is very, very small, but honestly, it works because time magic is such a specific flavor that these all work. None of the other powers really make sense as far as Time Lord goes. So you are pretty limited on what you can actually do as a Time Lord. I mean, there's some debuffs here and there's kind of some utility, right? So it's definitely usable, don't get me wrong, but you're not going to be like really having a big versatile power set at all, by any means. Their kind of drawback is they have the butterfly effect table, which is what I personally dislike a lot, but we'll get into it. And then they can take the gifted edge, which is extra effort, where you can spend power points after you've made an arcane skill roll to kind of beef it up. I think it's like 1 power point per +1 and 3 power points for +2, I believe. Did I save it? I don't think I did, but yeah. Nope, I didn't. Okay. So let's actually talk about the this butterfly effect table. Now, this is kind of similar to like a wild sorcerer, a chaos sorcerer. I actually made in my science fiction game that I wrote, I made an arcane background that was a void, just spacing out the name. It was like void sorcerer basically that kind of had a table that you rolled on that random effects could happen. The reason I don't like this is because at the very least, for one, it just doesn't just affect the Chronomancer itself. It affects the allies and some of the options like pretty brutally. Also, sometimes it puts a lot of onus on the game master to do stuff and to change things. And also it can really, really, really slow games down. So for those reasons alone, I just game masters really think about this. Don't just allow players before just throwing it in, like ask the game master, like, hey, I want to play Chronomancer. Have you seen the critical effect table? But let's get into it. So 2 is fundamental shift. Now this one is, they say some pretty big ones like a different world leader, right? There's no more blue, which kind of doesn't make sense. The main contact is a different gender or species, whatever. So this one, the part that I don't like is that it kind of forces the game master to change something, so they might not want to do that, but really you could just do anything here, right? You could just say, oh, this person has a different accent now, or instead of the noodles being called zoodles, they're called Richie's tube sock. I don't know. Richie's tube strings or something, right? You could have fun with this. So this is not that big of a deal. But it's still a little bit of an onus on the game master to do extra work, right? So it's still something to be aware of, but can be, it's absolutely, there's no level here of how big the shift has to be. It just has to change something in reality. Okay. And it's like one of the least ones to actually happen. Now, Time Stutter, which is 3 between 4. In combat, this one is one of the ones I hate the most, actually, I think. Probably, I don't know if it's tied, but I hate this so much. You discard all remaining allied action cards in combat. The antagonists keep theirs and act normally. Out of combat, the Chronomancer and his allies are stuck in a recursive loop, and they enact the scene over and over again, basically. You narrate the experience and how it resolved, and then everyone is exhausted for the next 24 hours. So as you can see, first of all, how it's written, I'm not really sure what happens here. the allies, all the allies, so all your party members, you just are out of combat, I guess. You don't have any action cards anymore, but then the enemies get to go, and I don't know if this is just for one round or they absolutely just get to wail on you. I mean, it's like the enemies still get to go, they act normally, right? So then it says out of combat, but like combat just seems like you would all be killed. The whole party would be murderized instantly. But even if that's not the case, like I'm not really, it's still affecting all of your allies, which sucks, right? And then after that, even if they haven't gotten absolutely wailed on or all their stuff's been stolen, everybody's exhausted for 24 hours. So this could really put a stutter in the kind of narrative flow, or if people want to do something, or the session itself. So this one I just really, really dislike because it just messes way too much with the other players, and it just can really put a roadblock in the narrative flow. Okay. 5 to 9, which is, so this is the one that's most likely to happen, obviously. The Chronomancer stunned, absolutely no problem with this one. This one is just affecting the Chronomancer. It's a more brutal version of the normal backlash. So yeah, absolutely cool with this one. 10 to 11 is Temporal Rupture, where basically some type of creature or somebody from time just comes into the combat, and it doesn't actually say combat. It cannot be combat, but probably usually in combat. And they're hostile at first. Again, this one's not horrible. It's definitely worse to me than Fundamental Shift. It's putting just more work on the Game Master to and some Game Masters might think it's fun, but eventually it might get old where they have to then go look up, get the creatures out, maybe get art for something. And it's just going to add time to a combat where, even though it's Savage World and it's fast, furious, and fun, combat still can sometimes drag on. So it just adds a lot more stuff, and it's just kind of messes with, if the Game Masters kind of balance out the encounter relatively, right, this might overthrow it. So it's just kind of putting onus on the Game Master. Now, Back in Time, which, I think Time Stutter I still hate the most because it's so weirdly written, but Back in Time is the other big one that I really, really dislike, where the entire encounter is just one possible outcome, and you start the entire encounter over again, right? And from the beginning, and only the Chronomancer knows what happened in the previous reality. I mean, first of all, just having to start over again is, what if you were playing this combat for 2 hours and you have to redo the whole thing, and now it goes into the next session now, and you really wanted to get to a certain point. Besides that part of just taking up way more time and kind of being boring for people, maybe. There's a lot of other problems with it in that now the Game Master has to put everything back and try to remember where everything was. There's all this kind of you don't metagame by only the Chronomancer knows what happened, but obviously the other players know what happened. And so if the Game Master had some type of, environmental effect that came into play, or some twist in the combat that they thought was really clever, now everybody kind of knows, even though they don't know, right? It's just kind of a weird metagaming trap that you're putting on everybody. So just really, 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 really dislike this, and dislike the whole thing as is. Now, this is giving the kind of flavor of the Chronomancer, because otherwise you're not getting any flavor, right, at all, based on what it is. So I think it's not that hard to fix this. I think the easiest way is just get rid of the extra power. So you only start with one power chosen, and just get rid of the critical failure effect table at all. That's the easiest way, but it's kind of the most boring. Other ways that you could do it is just keep in the stunning the Chronomancer, maybe the Temporal Rupture, right? Or a Temporal Rupture and the Fundamental Shift, definitely the Fundamental Shift and the Visions you could be kept in, and just have that as being the table. More interesting, I would say, is actually giving them you could also just give a different minor hindrance if you want to keep the extra 2 powers. But if you want to make it more interesting, I would say give them take away the extra power, take away the critical failure effect, give them a major hindrance that makes sense, right? There's a bunch of major hindrances to choose from, and then give them we'll see ahead of time, one of the edges, especially the novice edge that's coming up, give that as just part of the base kit of the Chronomancer itself. One that I kind of like is the corruption hindrance, which was found the fantasy book. I think it's in some other stuff too. But basically is whenever they critically fail, they just gain a new minor hindrance, or the minor hindrance goes up to a major hindrance. Now, you can kind of reflavor this. In this, it's kind of they're dealing with entities and, Cthulhu-like patrons or demons, whatever. Just reflavor this as their mind kind of gets ripped through time. They see alternate realities that are horrible, right? It just has the timey-wimey. It just has a corruptive influence on their brain and their mental health. So I think it's just kind of cool to give them that in place of it, right? And then we can give them the one of the edges. So hold on. Yeah. So let's actually talk about them now. So let's move on to the edges. So, okay, we have Premonition, which is a novice edge, and she may spend 2 power points to add +1 or 3 power points for +2 to evasion or soak rolls after the roll is made, and you can affect as allies as long as they're within range equal to Smart's die type. Now, again, I would have liked to see Spirit here, but whatever, it's a Smart. So here's a pretty cool, unique ability where it's, the evasion... it's just okay, right? The evasion is like, it comes up sometimes, but it's nice that it's there. The soak one is way better. This is kind of like the Miracles edge that we saw, Holy Warrior, but it affects, it's not as, it's more expensive. That one was just a PowerPoint per soak roll. This one is 1 PowerPoint for 1, or then it's 3 PowerPoints for 2. And it doesn't go up to all the way to +4 soak, but it's cool that it can affect both you and allies, which is kind of a unique part of it, because often these abilities only affect you or affect allies. It's kind of mutually exclusive. So that it also affects evasion. That's what makes it really cool. And this really fits the flavor of the Chronomancer, right? You've kind of seen, you've had a premonition, you've seen ahead, oh, this is happening, and you give kind of bonus, and you can do this to all your allies. It will get expensive, but yeah, this is really, really cool. I love this one. And then now, again, if you take away the critical failure effect, take away the extra power, give them a major hindrance, put premonition in there, now the base Chronomancer feels like a Chronomancer, right? You're getting that flavor right away. So that's what I would recommend. Okay, let's talk about rearrange time. Basically, it's an initiative edge, and after everybody has been giving at the start of any round, after everyone's been giving their cards and everything, and all the edges like little level-headed and quick comes into play, you can spend a Benny to force any target, friend or foe, to draw a new action card, and then the Chronomancer chooses whether they may keep it or not. And then after that, they can't be changed. You can't do it again. If there's 2 Chronomancers, they can't do it also. If the action card is a Joker, you can't then change it. And if they get a Joker, you can't tell. You can't. They're able to keep it if it's an enemy. This one's just okay. Is a Benny worth? I mean, Common Bond. You could give somebody a Benny to. You could give your friend a Benny to get this anyway. So this kind of is again like similar to Common Bond in a way, but Common Bond has a lot more flexibility. Obviously, the advantage here is being able to do it to an enemy, right? You just have to be kind of strategic with how you use this. Now, I probably would, if the enemy has, whether you give it to an ally or an enemy, if like the enemy is going before all of your allies, right, then you want to do it on the enemy. If the enemy has probably a Jack or higher, like or Queen or higher, then I would do it on the enemy. Otherwise, if I wanted to give one of my allies above it, I would only do it in the case of the enemy is kind of like below a Jack or below a 10, right? And then I know the ally will probably go before them. So you normally really using this on enemies, right? But then you have the drawback of if they get a Joker, they get to keep it. So this is just an okay edge. I'm not too crazy about it. I would definitely, way before taking this, there's so many edges to take and so many things to take as an arcane caster, right? Especially if you want to do other things besides just cast magic or powers. So, taking new power points, new powers, concentration, all that stuff I would take way before this. And it might even take Common Bond. So this one's just okay. Let's talk about Time Lord. This is another initiative one. It's heroic, but you get to spend a Benny at the start of a turn, and you get an additional action card, and you act on both. This is absolutely insane. This is absolutely worth it. To spend a Benny to get an extra turn per combat is crazy. Again, this is after you get your normal action card, but this one is absolutely worth it. You really will feel like the Time Lord of like being able to go twice. And then, in one of your turns, you do get access to Time Stop. But Time Stop, they kind of changed and nerfed in some ways where you can't do anything offensive. So you could definitely do this on top of Time Stop and maybe the speed power and just go absolutely hog wild on, all these like time initiative extra turn edges. So this one's really, really cool. So overall, Chronomancer as is a boop from me just because of this critical failure effect table. But I think with some very easy tweaks, it becomes a very, very flavorful and interesting arcane background. And the edges really kind of feed into that. So yeah, very cool. Okay. Let's talk about Gravlock. Now, Gravlock is a gravity-based caster, which I absolutely love. Gravity as a power set, it's one of my favorites. I've always tried to make superpower, a superhero, superpower companion, make it using gravity. So I love that this is here. I like their flavor. I don't really know, where Time Lord was obviously Doctor Who. They even have a Doctor Who quote. Gravlock, I'm really not sure if this is from anything. They talk about like G runners and G men. Being like, in like industry, like lifting, or people as like intrusion specialists. I don't know if that's from something. If you know, please add it in the comments, because I just don't know. But yeah, let's get into it. They start with telekinesis and wall walker, and 10 power points. So they're already at kind of a little bit of a -1, basically like a minor hindrance, because they're missing 1 power. And they're also a focus based caster. Now, it's funny here, they didn't get access to the Gifted Edge. I don't know if was intentional or if that was left out. If I was the Game Master, I'd probably still allow them to have access to it, because all the other focus-based casters in this book get access to it. So I'm not sure why they were left out, but anyways. Also, especially because they're the most superhero feeling of all the Arcane backgrounds, pretty much. So anyways, they get telekinesis and wall walker. So telekinesis is a seasoned edge normally, and it does a lot. So just having telekinesis and wall walker is actually like a pretty cool full, you don't have any defensive powers here, but you can do a lot with telekinesis. It's kind of like an open power where you can do a ton of stuff and interact with the environment. And wall walker is a pretty good mobility power that allows you to also interact with the environment. So pretty good start here. Their power list is pretty small. But it's solid. I mean, they have control powers, buffs, and defense. There's no direct damage ones here, but they do have access to smite and telekinesis, which has some damage options. And then finally, they have the mass management, which is basically they treat their encumbrance and their minimum strength stuff on armor and weapons as 1 step higher. So it stacks with Soldier and Brawny. This kind of acts as like half of Soldier and Brawny. So it's basically worth half an edge. So that definitely mechanically balances out with them having 1 less power starting. Now, there's also a little bit of bonus here that's kind of not apparent from first look. So they're only one of 2 Arcane backgrounds that have access to the black hole power, and they're the only Arcane background in this book that has access to the gravitate power, which obviously makes sense. So let's actually look at those powers right now. So let's start out with black hole. Both of these new powers, by the way, they're absolutely super, super strong control powers. I mean, not as versatile as Barrier, but probably more potent. So black hole is a veteran power. It's kind of expensive starting out at 3 power points, but smarts ×2, which is a really cool range. You don't see that much, especially with control powers. Basically, it creates a singularity that is a large burst template anywhere within range, and sentient beings have to make an immediate strength roll +2 when they got a raise on their arcane skill roll, and those who fail are drawn d6 inches to the center and take 2d6 damage, ignoring all but magical armor. So not insane amount of damage here, but it does ignore all armor except for magic armor, so that actually is pretty good. And this is actually a higher damage than you usually see on like Barrier and Havoc and all those kind of things, right? This is basic bolt damage, so still pretty good. On subsequent rounds, all characters have to attempt a strength roll, again as a free action with the same penalty as above, and if they succeed, or even critically succeed, they move at half pace, or they're again drawn d6 inches toward the center for 2d6 damage. Now, what's crazy here is that, it's a large burst template, but you're normally probably activating it right on top of enemies or, very close to them. So they're probably getting drawn into the center, most likely, right? And taking that 2d6 damage. Then on their turn, even if they succeed, right? If they succeed, they only can move half pace. Most characters in the game have a 6-inch pace. That means they're moving only 3 inches. It's very likely that they're not escaping this large burst template. Remember, a large burst template, is 3 inches. So, sorry, I got a little confused here, but they're making it to the edge. So it's not totally crazy here on the base power. but it's still pretty good, right? And the D6 inches is where it gets really better is this area effect mod, which is 3 extra power points. So again, now we're at 6 power points, maybe 7 with selective, and then it increases to 10 inches radius, and the damage gets pumped up to 3d6. So now we have an amazing control power and an amazing damage power all wrapped into one, like one of the best, really. Because like I said, even if they succeed, they go to half pace. So they're definitely not getting out of a 10-inch radius. I mean, that's a huge radius, right? And now it doesn't say here, but it seems like that whenever it doesn't say like once you have like resisted it, you're not affected by it anymore. It doesn't say that. I don't think that's the case. So basically, even if they succeed, they're still stuck in it and they have to make the roll again, right? They might not even get out of a second time. So again, depending how the Game Master is ruling this, it can't be not as strong, but how I see it, at least raw and probably is intended, that on subsequent rounds, if you're kind of within its sphere of influence, you have to keep rolling again. So really, really, really strong control and damage power all wrapped into one. Now you think this would be the best one, but the next one, when it's pumped up, is actually probably the best control power in the game, hands down. Kind of a mix of a control and debuff. Well, this is kind of a mix of a control and a damage power. And that is Gravitate. So Gravitate, again, is a novice power, so we get it right away. It's 3 power points with only a range of smarts, and it causes the gravity to strengthen or weaken with a large burst template placed within range of the caster. And once activated, the caster chooses to increase or reduce gravity by 1 level or 2 levels with a raise. Now, we have to kind of talk about gravity and how it works in the game, because that'll come into some of the other stuff with the Gravlock Arcane Background. So let's actually talk about the whole gravity system. Because what does that mean, increasing it by 1 level or 2, or reducing it by 1 level or 2 levels? So there's 2 things when it comes to gravity. Come on. Here we go. Okay. So for one thing, we have acclimation. So just ignore this table for now. We have acclimation. So acclimation is something that is affected by gravity and also like atmosphere stuff. If you're in a different gravity than what you're acclimated to, so when you start out, that's the gravity from your kind of home planet or the planet you've been living in, right? It's the last thing that you've acclimated to. If you're in a different gravity, like if you start out normal, if you're in heavy or low, you have a -2 to agility attribute and rolls, and a -2 to agility linked skills, which is absolutely crazy. Now, usually acclimation takes up to a week. It could be quicker depending on other factors, but in combat, they're not going to get acclimated right away, right? So a -2 in agility, this is good for like evasion attempts, but it's the -2 in agility based skill rolls. That's all of the combat skills, right? That's athletics, fighting, and shooting. So absolutely -2 is gigantic in this game to have on rolls. So this is just absolutely brutal thing to have on you. Besides that fact, there's also this table, which basically is that if you're in this level of gravity, this kind of affects your, now it's, they simplified it. It's not like that if you were born in a heavy gravity, it's not like you treat that as normal. It's just like, this is just what happens when you're in these gravity levels. And basically, your jump is, if you're in a heavier one, your jump is half the distance, which is not really anything. It's more that the strength is a -1. This affects damage, obviously, -1 or -2. So kind of minor debuff to damage here. It's mostly about the pace, which is a -2 or -4, right? Alternatively, I guess you could say there could be a buff, increasing your pace. But, this is only going to be really effective against kind of melee combatants and like beast creatures, right? That rely on melee combat, melee damage, and also their pace getting to you. So that's where this comes in. But obviously the bigger debuff here is on the acclimation penalties. So, what do I have here? Okay. Yeah. So let's look at this again. It's a large burst template. It's a large burst template. And when somebody's in it, right, you're basically probably increasing the gravity to give them a negative on their pace, and then they have these -2 on agility rolls. So on its base, it's not that big of a deal, because while there's no rolls to resist it, it just happens, which is cool. Somebody could just move out of it at the same moment and just be free from its effects. So while they might have a -2 to their pace, again, if it's a large burst template, so even if you put it directly on them, and they have a pace of 6, they have 4 inches to get out of it. Now, if you're doing it over like your party members and enemies, so they're like in melee range with each other, and you do selective, so now we're at 4 power points, then it's a lot more effective. Then, the enemies have to decide to move out of range, maybe get an attack of opportunity, or just have a minus to their strength damage and a minus to their fighting rolls, right? So still good. Where it becomes absolutely crazy and over the top as far as control and a debuff power goes is, this 3 power point mod called Local Envelope, where it changes to a 25-inch radius. 25-inch radius, okay? That's even way more extreme than the Singularity power and absolutely insane. That means that it's enough to encompass a size 14 vessel. So even if you're in space, you can do this in space. I mean, normally the distances involved with space combat with spaceships is, you're not in range, right? But ground vehicles, any type of vehicles, you can affect the entire crew of an entire ship or vehicle or whatever, right? This is going to be the whole battlefield. This is the entire map. 25-inch radius is the entire map usually. So you're affecting everybody. So, doing 3 power points with local envelopes and probably selective is 7 power points, but now you're getting an automatic debuff and control of every enemy on the battlefield having a -2 to agility rolls, having a -2 to their combat skill, if they're not an arcane caster, and also having -2 on their pace, or even a -4 on their pace, right? If you're doing the heavy gravity. So, it's very, very strong when you put that many power points into it. One of the strongest powers in the game, I would say now. Maybe some people might think it's too strong. It's a hard thing to tweak. I don't see any way that you tweak it would kind of make it not worth it, right? If you tweaked it on having a roll to just kind of not, resist it, then it's super expensive for something that might be easily resisted, right? Maybe it's like each round they can spend an action to resist it, or they get a free action to resist it each round. Maybe I could see as you tweaking it. Then maybe make it a PowerPoint cheaper because of that. That's the only way I could really see you kind of nerfing a little bit, but still remaining balanced. So, okay. I know there was a lot of talk about those powers, but they were a lot to get into. And as you could see, again, the black hole is only available to the Gravlock and to the I forget what they're called, the Warper, and Gravitate's only available to the Gravlock. So, anyways, again, so all in all, they're extremely well balanced. The mass management there is a really cool ability. It is very flavorful, right? The cool thing here is that when you want to, as an arcane caster, maybe have some better armor. Maybe you want to do a mixed, build of having powers and also using guns, right? And some of the guns you want are D6 strength minimum. The problem with Soldier and Brawny is that they both require you already to have a D6 strength. So you kind of have to do a double investment to kind of get what you want, or you already have to do investment. So this actually opens up a lot of cool, it fits flavor wise. And it also just fits some cool builds that you can do as involving, having an arcane caster, using guns, but then still staying down at its D4 strength, right? So really cool and flavorful, and kind of fits the vibe of kind of being a superhero almost. Let's talk about their edges. Now, the Gravity Master edge is that at any time they can set their personal gravity field up or down 1 level from their current environment. Now, again, I love the flavor of this one, but this one's a big fail to me just because, as we said, let's actually look at it again. It's from their current environment. So, this really depends on the game you're playing. If you're going to a lot of different planets where there's a ton of gravity coming at you, then maybe it's cool to kind of get out of the effects of those things, right? Maybe, because it's only 1 step. It's not 2 steps or 3 steps. It's only 1 step away. So if you were in super heavy, you could get to heavy. The problem is, and they don't, did I just mess up? Here we go. Let me fix this. Okay. The problem here is that they don't talk about, are you affected by, the acclamation, right? Reading as it's written, yes, you would be still kind of affected by the acclamation penalties. So, while when they talk about acclamation, there is a gravitic acclamation edge, which basically allows you to ignore the effects of that when you're in different gravity. But now that means you have to kind of take this edge and another edge just to kind of use it for what it is. And what it is just kind of getting, maybe you're buffing your pace by 2, maybe you're, kind of lowering the pace penalty, but it's just not worth it to me, I don't think. Maybe after after you've taken a lot of other edges that you want, like power-based edges, and you see that in your game has tons and tons of different gravity going at you all the time. So you've already taken the gravitic whatever edge that allows you to ignore that, then maybe it's worth it. But this is another one that I'm just kind of disappointed because I like the flavor of it, but it's just really, really not worth it mechanically. Okay. Lifter is the Seasoned Edge. Now, this one is awesome. For one, it increases your telekinesis power all the way up to strength D12 plus 2 and D12 plus 4. This is a big boost because telekinesis on its own is a D10 or D12. So you're getting it's going up basically 3 steps, right? On the base one, 3 die increases at the very least. So that this is a huge just native bonus you get with telekinesis. And because we already get telekinesis from our starting power list, right, this is just a huge buff to our stuff. And you can start to weigh really, really heavy stuff. So this is actually now, again, getting to that superpower companion riffs level of lifting huge things. You also get these 2 mods, which are really unique and powerful. You get the area effect mod, which allows you to do telekinesis in a big area effect, which, again, if you go back to telekinesis, there can be stuff like grabbing everybody and lifting them in the air, and then bashing everybody at once, maybe manipulating a lot of objects at once. So it's just a really, really cool mod to have in your back pocket that kind of increases the flavor and the capabilities that you have. So yeah, definitely worth it for 2 power points because, again, telekinesis is the power that lasts for round after round, so you can keep affecting it. So it's definitely a good value as well. The power one basically allows you to keep spending 2 power points at a time to keep increasing that your strength of D12 plus 4, D12 plus 5, plus 6, plus 7. So now we're really getting into riffs and superpower companion stuff. Although the drawback is, besides being kind of expensive, is that afterwards you have to roll a vigor roll. Is it at a -2? And if you fail, you're exhausted. If you succeed, you're still fatigued. So, it doesn't talk about if you, on a raise, you have no ill effects. So, vigor roll at -2 is kind of a harsh penalty to then become exhausted if you fail, but it's just cool to have. The other ones were enough. The area effect and the base increase was enough. This is just kind of a cherry on top of that. When you need to be really epic and pick up, the insane vessel or whatever. I mean, I don't know how many power points you have to spend on that, but you're starting to lift 10 tons, right? It's just a really cool kind of epic thing to happen. So all in all, I think the Gravitic is the flavor here definitely does match the mechanics mostly. I mean, yes, definitely. Even the Gravity Master, the flavor matches. It's just not great mechanically, but just a really cool, flavorful arcane caster that I think would be a lot of fun to play and has some interesting builds. I'm probably going to play this mixed with a rifle person in the next game that we play with Carl. Okay. Hard Light Controller. Now we're only doing 2 more. Stick with me. Hard Light Controller is basically Green Lantern. They even call that out. It's a smart space one. It's kind of making illusions real. It's actually very similar to I've talked about it before, but in our last science fiction game that we ran, I used the Illusionist Arcane Background from the Fantasy Companion to basically do this. I had a portable gauntlet that was a portable tabletop tango. Tabletop Tango, a portable tabletop game emitter, I called it Merchants and Marauders. So that's basically what it did. So it's a smart spaced caster. It uses science as the arcane skill. So that's actually a big bonus there. Anytime that you have an arcane skill that already uses a different skill, it's a really, really good value in that you don't have to spend, all these extra skill points on getting one of your main skills up there. So if you really want to be a science-based character that also has these cool, sciencey powers, although I don't really know why they chose science. I would think electronics actually makes more sense, but whatever. It's really good value, right? Because you don't have to spend all these extra skill points in it. Okay, you get starting powers, Create Item and Illusion, and 1 other power from the list. Both Create Item and Illusion are really cool, versatile powers. Often people don't like Create Item. I really do. I think it's a really cool MacGyver type power that if you're creative, it's another open power like telekinesis and like illusion. I actually have a whole video about illusion. So if you're interested about utilizing illusion to the fullest, go check that out. But yeah, again, illusion is an open power. Now I am very disappointed that none of the powers in here that they added have any mega power modifiers. I think science fiction, out of even more than fantasy, needs mega power modifiers just to keep up with all the crazy, technology that you have access to. But anyways, yeah, illusion and create items. So you're kind of fitting this, portable holodeck person, and then you get one other power from the list and 15 power points. So as you can see here, we're already starting with not even looking at any of the other stuff. We're starting out very strong, right? We have science as an arcane skill. We get 3 powers and 15 power points. So already that's like a +2, like an edge or an edge and a half at this point. Probably more like an edge point and a quarter, really, with science being the arcane skill. Now the power list is extremely small. But it lacks mobility powers, it lacks healing, it lacks the kind of better buff and debuff powers. But it has a interesting mix of create item and illusion, like those kind of powers, defensive powers, and all the big 3 of the offensive powers, right? Blast, bolt, and burst. So definitely some cool stuff in here. But you would quickly run out of kind of powers that you can choose from. They have the encased ability, which basically means that they maintain this glowing kind of shield around them, and at any time, they can spend 2 power points instead of a Benny to make a soak roll. So this is actually pretty similar to the monk ability from Savage Pathfinder that I think is like a veteran heroic, which allows them to do the same thing. And again, similar to the the chaplain's the reproach ability, right? Now we have a really efficient way of soaking. For every normal soak that you do, you're getting 2 uses of the encased ability, right? If you have to soak twice in a combat, that's 5 uses of the encased ability because, again, a Benny's worth 5 power points. So really, really, really efficient. Now, you can turn the shield off or on again as a free action on your turn. But if it's off when you take damage, you don't get to use it. So you kind of think, okay, why would it be off? Well, obviously, the tech-dependent thing coming up, which is kind of the hindrance here, means that you have to have this glowing thing on, these emitters on, or you take a -4 to your stealth rolls while they're active. So that's kind of one of the hindrances here. And then finally, the critical failure effect is... let's talk about tech-dependent for a second. This isn't so bad because most of the time... This is only really affecting when you're being stealthy. None of your powers are particularly stealth-based. I mean, maybe illusion if you want to hide and cast an illusion to distract somebody. That's the main kind of drawback here. But generally, if you're casting powers, you're probably messing with people or in combat, right? You don't need to stealth, so that you can turn it off when you want to be stealthy is pretty good here. So this is very, very, very much a minor hindrance, even though that -4 to stealth is pretty brutal. So you can't really use illusion at the same time while trying to be sneaky. And then we have a critical failure effect that when you critically fail, you lose all of your remaining power points. This is absolutely devastating, especially with an arcane background that starts with 15 power points. So yeah, this one's just horrible, horrible. I mean, it's not horrible design-wise. It's just absolutely brutal to you as an arcane caster to lose all your power points. So in this case, what I would do personally is that, you're making a smart space character that uses science. Have your smart start really high and just have your arcane skill be starting at a D10 or a D12, and as soon as possible get it up to a D12, right? You want to have your arcane skill at a D12 as soon as possible, so you just limit the chances of getting a critical failure as quickly as possible, because that would just be horrible. Cool. So all in all, though, do I think here we have basically we're starting with science as our skill. We have we're starting with the extra power points, which is, again, we can still take power points edge, start with 20 power points if we want. So that's already an edge and a half, right? Edge and a quarter. And then we get the encase, which is basically another edge. So we're kind of up 4, 4.5, 4.25 points. Do I think the critical failure and tech dependent equals that 2.5? No, I don't. I think Hard Light Controller so far is mechanically probably the strongest, just on its core, the strongest one mechanically coming out. But it's not crazy, crazy strong. I just think you're kind of the most ahead. Again, it's not a big deal. This is a deep dive, so we're talking about it. I do think the flavor is absolutely on point though here, as far as that being a Hard Light Controller. All right, let's talk about the edges here. So we have the hardware upgrade edge, which you add +1. Oh, sorry. There's one other thing I want to talk about that's really important. when you have an arcane skill that's already a skill. Now this happened before with, I believe in Deadlands, there was like a gadgeteer, I think, that used repair instead of weird signs. I don't remember what it was, but there's another arcane background that has repair. And one of the things that I've run and other game masters like Carl is that we don't allow Mr. Fix-It to be used when there's repair as the arcane skill. Now, same thing here with science, is that there is the Scholar Edge that gives you a +2 on any of your knowledge-based skills, right? Which includes science. Now, it's not the most spelled out, but I'm pretty, I'm 99% sure raw, and definitely as intended, this should not be able to use on your arcane skill activation if you went with a hard light controller. Basically, Scholar is there to be about, it's really about knowing things, not about doing things. It's about recalling knowledge about things, not about actually doing stuff, right? So if you're using science to even like create something, it might not even be used for that, right? So it shouldn't. +2 on an arcane skill is extremely strong. And if you see most companion books, most setting books, they do not give +2 out, right? The Wizard in Savage Pathfinder gets like a +1 or something. And that's equal to a familiar, which is an S tier edge, right? They can either choose the familiar or they can choose +1 on their arcane skill activation rules. So, it's just there's just no way Scholar should be able to apply it. Okay, getting back to it. Hardware upgrade gives +1 to your science roll. So again, it does something else, but only +1 to your science rolls. And now when you get a critical failure, it's only D6 power points, not all your remaining powers. So that's just, you absolutely want to take this as soon as possible. Right when you get to heroic, you want this edge. +1 to science rolls is huge for activating your powers specifically. And then you're really, 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 really lessening that critical failure effect. So really awesome. Not too flavorful, but just really strong. Again, really making this probably one of the strongest arcane backgrounds. But again, you have to wait till heroic. Finally, we get to infused. You can spend one more power point to add +2 to damage totals on your offensive powers, including summoned allies. So this goes to the big three of Bolt, Blast, and Burst, as well as summoned allies. This is absolutely worth it. Now, again, this is like just an edge to then get a mod, right? To 3 different powers or 4 different powers, and that's only if you've taken them. So as you saw with the gravity one, kind of buffed a power you already had and gave you mods. This one's just basically a mod of adding +2 damage. Do I think one power point is worth it? 100%, right? Normally, it's 1 power point to give armor piercing 2. +2 damage is way, 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 way better than armor piercing 2 because things might not have armor, and you're just wasting power points at that point. So +2 damage is always going to be better than that. It's worth the same amount as that, and you can still put armor piercing on top of it. So this makes it one of the best blasters in the game too. Again, not quite sure on the flavor. These 2 edges, not like as far as melding with the rest of the arcane background, but it is making it, again, probably the strongest mechanically arcane background that we've at least seen so far, by far. Okay. Moving on to the last one is Mystic. Sorry. Okay. So Mystic is a space priest or just kind of someone that mixes science and spiritual practices. Not really necessarily they don't like a god or an ideal. They're just kind of linked into the intricacies and the vibrations of the universe. I definitely get the vibes of, I just started rewatching Farscape. I never actually finished it before, so I just started watching it again. And I can't remember her name, but the blue-skinned alien in that is definitely like, you get Mystic vibes, right? They have these kind of like spiritual powers, but they're not really like, they do mention goddess, I guess, but they're definitely a mystic, right? Because they're also kind of a chemist at times and other things, kind of acts as a scientist. So that's the vibe I get from this. But yeah, another gifted caster. They use focus, not faith, which is actually interesting. And Spirit D6, so they get 3 powers, any 3, and 10 power points. So again, kind of the normal magic or miracles. Not something you normally see with a gifted caster. So it's interesting kind of twist here. They got a big power list, as you can see. Now they don't have any offensive yet, or they don't really have many control, but otherwise no healing, direct healing. But otherwise they got all the other bases covered. So this is actually probably the best. You'll see this is the best overall power list out of all the ones that we've seen. They get access to the gifted edge, extra effort, which is, in my opinion, probably the best overall of the base Suede edges. You know, even compared to the Holy Warrior and the Psionics one, the Mentalist. This is probably the best overall because it just always applies. And then you get Harmonic Resonance. So before rolling to activate a power, whether you're in combat or not, if you get a diamond, you're in resonance and you get a +2 on your arcane skill roll. If you get a club, you're in dissonance and it just costs an extra power point. And basically, if you don't have an extra power point, you have to short, which means that you then have a -1 on the power. Yeah, so this one is interesting. You know, it is half the time it's not doing anything because, you know, if you get a heart or a spade, nothing happens, right? So half the time it doesn't do anything, and a quarter of the time it's good and really good. Again, +2 is really good, and a quarter of the time it's not that bad. It's just eh. So the benefit here probably it way outweighs the drawback that you get. You know, because it's not a minus on the arcane skill. Usually people have an extra power point laying around. So, and I would recommend that you usually don't ever get down to 0 power points when you're casting a power as a mystic. So, really here, I think that it's supposed to be kind of a wash, but it's just slightly ahead. You know, again, it's like half of an edge. I would even say this is half of an edge worth it, probably. And then that's not it, though. If this was just it, you'd be like, okay, that's kind of a cool, flavorful thing that's actually well-balanced. But then they just decided to throw in this, Cosmic Guidance. You get a free reroll when making academics, common knowledge, occult, or science rolls. What? Now, I said before that the Hard Light Controller was basically on the strong side. This by far is, again, just not strong, but mechanically speaking, the most ahead. Because Cosmic Guidance is a full edge. I mean, this is the Lore Master 1 from Savage Pathfinder, where you get lore. You get the same exact thing. You get a free reroll on all these things. And it's not a free reroll on a failed attempt. While generally, a +2 on for Scholar is stronger for that individual skill, that it applies to all of them is very strong. Now, you are a spirits-based arcane background, but this is definitely wants you to lean into that mix of having kind of spiritualism, but also science, also kind of logic, right? It's that mix of, they even say the mixture of astrology and astronomy, although I don't think that really applies. Astrology is just complete hokum, but yeah, it doesn't even make sense in science fiction terms, but I get what they're going for, right? Because anyways. So you're a whole edge, right? If we assume harmonic resonance is their idea of kind of evening out, right? Harmonic resonance is definitely not more of a hindrance than it is a boon, right? It tends to be balanced out at the very least, and I think it's ahead. So you're just getting a whole full edge on top of an arcane background that doesn't have any other drawbacks, right? Doesn't have a tiny power list, doesn't have any other drawbacks at all. So I'm not really sure what they were going for here, but that definitely makes the Mystic, again, while not being like super strong mechanically, like damage-wise, and all like the Hard Light Controller, it's just you're just getting ahead. Also, this is like a really good dip for somebody who just wants to be a knowledgeable person. Obviously, that might not fit your flavor, but taking this, if you have a spirit of a D6, which you probably do, just taking this for Cosmic Guidance is worth it. And then on top of that, you're just getting some powers that you might want to take, right? So again, really, really strong, definitely flavorful, but I'm not really sure the Cosmic Guidance fits the flavor necessarily, but I get what they're going for. Anyways, okay, let's talk about the next two edges. They get attuned, which is basically when they're in harmonic resonance, they add plus D6 to the roll instead of +2. This stacks with conviction. Now, this is their normal kind of upgrade. Like when we look at Assassin and Sneak Attack, Assassin is a +2 in damage, and Sneak Attack is a D6. Now, I definitely think this one is not worth it right away. This is definitely one that you want to take down the line after you've taken some other edges that we'll just talk about in a second. So, because it's just so absolutely random when you're in resonance, that it's just that to take a whole edge to maybe get the bonus of +2 to a D6 it's just really not worth it, you know, because a lot of the time you're just not going to be getting it happen all the time. So you may be excited about taking this, but I just want to caution people, players, that you might get this and just might fall flat because you're just not having it happen enough times for you, right? And you could be taking like power points, new powers, concentration, all those type of things. Let's talk about Celestial Symphony. Now, Celestial Symphony is actually 4 edges in 1. That's not restricted by rank or anything. So they actually have, so far, the most edges, the most specific arcane edges that you can take. Basically, when you take this, you choose one: moon, sun, stars, or planets. So first, we're starting with moon. Is that when you, after drawing a card to see if she's in resonance, that they spend a power point to draw one more card, which replaces the first. So again, this one's just okay, right? This is one that you definitely want to take before you take Attuned. Again, I still just don't totally like this in that, right? You know, say you. I mean, I guess it's good if you get a club, right? And so you spend a power point. But what if you get a club again? That would just really, really suck. And you could spend a power point and just have nothing happen. 50% of the time, it's just nothing's happening, right? So, you know, while I said it's making Attuned more worth it, you're still spending 2 edges and then end power points to kind of have something work better, right? That's still kind of very based on random chance. So, again, I haven't played this, but I've played so much Savage Worlds. I always play Arcane Casters, or at least Mystic Powers. I just get the feeling that this would just kind of fall flat most of the time. But it's not bad per se. It just would not really happen enough to make it worth taking 2 edges. Anyways, okay, then we have Sun. So the Mystic gains Bolt, Blast, and Burst powers with 2 separate trappings, the Star and Fire trappings. So now their available power list becomes insane. I mean, it becomes the best one that we've seen. They got most of the stuff on there besides healing now. And basically the Sun, because you can take this at Novice, is the new Power's Edge, right? But it's a new Power's Edge plus, because usually you only get 2 powers with new Power's Edge. Here you're getting 3. I mean, now Blast and Burst, usually I wouldn't take both of these. I would take Bolt and Blast or Bolt and Burst, but I normally wouldn't take Blast and Burst because I can usually kind of accomplish, one with the other. But you're still getting 3 powers for the price of 1 edge. So really, really strong, and you're getting 2 trappings. So cool. The Star Edge, you have to have the Sun one first. When you cast those powers with a raise, you get 2d6 damage instead of 1d6. Now, again, this one's, okay, so this one is then now worth it. When we look at now Attuned, we look at Moon, and now we look at this. Now, while I said that I don't like the randomness of it, there is a lot of cohesion, and this is where the cohesion really, really comes into play here. Now, it is kind of 4 edges to get this kind of cohesiveness, but basically, if you have Attuned, you have Moon, you have Sun and Stars, you're trying to become in resonance before you cast a offensive power, right? Because if you get in resonance, you either get a +2 to your arcane skill roll or you get a d6, and so you're very, very likely to have a raise, which then increases your raise damage up by an extra die, which is really, really good, right? Even better than a +2 damage. So when unlike the Hard Light controller, which just gets +2 damage on their rolls, this kind of now meets them as far as Blaster Caster, as far as doing the most damage. I mean, there's less investment for the Hard Light controller, so that's probably still a little bit better, but you're still getting, you have a lot more flexibility with this one than Hard Light controller. Okay, finally, planets, you just get a +2 toughness. I mean, this is absolutely balanced. This is worth an edge because, in the Ancestry Creation rules, 1 toughness is worth 1 point. Like an edge is worth 2 points in that, so to have 2 toughness, it would be worth basically what an edge is. But you just don't really see edges give +2 toughness. You see like Brawny or something, or Brawler or Brawny give you +1 to your size, or in Bruiser's case, you just get +1 toughness. So there is ways to get that, but this is like you're an arcane caster, right? You don't need to have or strength or vigor already up. So this is actually really, really cool. It makes you very, very defensive. So all in all, I think Mystic is probably the most flavorful out of all of them, and a very, very, very strong arcane caster, and very powerful and very interesting one to do. Okay, I know that was a lot of word salad. I talked pretty quickly, but we have a whole part 2 coming up. So if you watch it this far, I hope you got something out of it. Let me know if you guys want a part 2, because if we get very low mileage on this one, I might not do it. So throw in the comments if you actually want a part 2. We have like Shifter and Star Knights in that one. So there's some really interesting arcane backgrounds in this. So once again, this was Tabletop Tango. Please like, subscribe, and push those buttons. And I've been Eric.
Savage World, one of the best games today. Savage World, Benny, enhance my play. Oh, Savage World, different setting in it.